adventures in future viewing.
Well, thank you much. It's nice to be here. It's a rainy day and might as well settle in and see what strange stuff universe has, yeah.
Yeah, what flavor of pie do you have handy?
Well, just finished an apple.
Okay.
So now we're in that in-between stage where, well, blueberry, marionberry, I just don't know. But I'll find out in a couple of days, I'm sure.
Well, according to what you're going to tell us, what your latest report was, we do have to stock up on pies and attitude.
Yeah.
Become aware, as you've always been saying. Gosh, it's important, and keep that smile on your faces.
But you know, in a sense, it's also kind of very surreal, as we'd said years ago. In the first ALTA reports, like 2003 or 4, we kept coming up with the idea that people in a far-term future would be living in a surreal environment. And you know, I always thought of it as like, oh well, okay, maybe space alien, interdimensional plantoids or something would pop up, and we'd all be freaking out about it. But it's even more subtle, but also more pervasive, because I've noticed recently that of the people I know who are aware of things, you go into town, for instance, and you might run into somebody who you know who knows. But mostly, it's the two of you, or however many there are, wandering around in a society that is oblivious to what we know, and to a certain extent wishes to be oblivious to us as well. And it lends a very surreal facet to your day.
Well, Cliff, I started thinking quite a few years back that we were getting into times where we would be living all the books that I used to have time to read for fun, which was science fiction, adventure, espionage, courage and bravery in battle.
Ain't it the truth? It's all here now.
It's all here now. It is amazing. I'm just waiting for that film Soylent Green to become reality here, because we're pretty damn close to that too.
Truly no. The issue for Soylent Green, if you look at the analysis of stuff, I mean, Buckminster Fuller set us a nice pattern in the 30s in terms of how to do a global analysis of resources, and it's been much more facilitated by the internet. And even assuming a huge bullshit factor from the government numbers of all of the governments that you might deal with in doing that assessment, it is my opinion that we could easily support 60 to 80 billion humans on this planet if we were efficiently organized. And the 10 billion that we're going to be approaching here fairly quickly should be no strain to the planet resources under normal circumstances, and even should be manageable under extraordinary ones if we alter how we do things. And that's just the issue. It's not overpopulation as they tried to sell us in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And as a personal note, as a military brat, the schools you would encounter out of the U.S. frequently were run by the military in a direct fashion, and you would get these strange messages that would come on in. So I came back to the States in the late 60s, fully indoctrinated in the globalist vision, which included the idea, even in the late 60s, that we were facing a tremendous, very imminent overpopulation problem. And that's not true at all. When you look at the total resources for food and everything, we need not do things the way we are. And if we were even only 20% more efficient on a global basis, we would have a surplus continuously, year after year after year, both in animal protein and vegetable protein and carbohydrates on a global scale.
Well, that's absolutely true. I think you'd be interested in Marcin Jakubowski. It's a new series we're starting. He's fabulous. He's implementing it, and once again restating the fact that there is no lack of resources. It abounds. But I was speaking regarding that film of the intentional.
Okay, now there you go. Then I would grant you that point, certainly.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of evil bastards out there, and they're creeping closer. The real problem at the moment on a broad scale, especially observable in our data over the last 4 or 5 years, is that the level of fear driving the powers that be and their minions is very high. Compared to even 5 years ago, we're probably more than tripled. I'll have to go and actually do a numerical analysis, but I believe we're more than tripled in current day-to-day values of the fear language and the powers that be over that period of time. And so their long-range fear is still driving them, but now they've got all kinds of short-term fears going as well. And to a certain extent, we're starting to see that fear shift over into desperation. As they get desperate, they're going to be like cornered rats, and a lot of us are going to get bit, I think, just as these guys are thrashing around in their final days.
Isn't it amazing for people that understand the human condition and the ways and means of manipulation and have such long-range plans that they can actually be startled or frazzled?
But it must work that way because we have a balancing universe. As an Aikidoist, Aikidoka, my viewpoint is very much like O-sensei, in the sense that the universe is a self-balancing organism. This is something that's also detailed in Synergetics, in the whole section on life, in Buckminster Fuller's seminal work. In any event, it has slop, it has allowance. So all this weird stuff can happen as we oscillate back and forth, because no extreme can be allowed to endure. So I find it, your statement there, you say, isn't it curious? And I would put it the other way, and I would say, isn't it reassuring? Isn't it self-validating, self-referentially integrous in the sense of how the universe structures itself, that even though there's all these bad guys and they're really good at these long-term plans and so on, the very nature of the mind that they must use to be that way defeats them in the end.
Yeah. Have you seen this happen to them in that respect?
Oh, certainly. I've observed it in my life many times. So, for instance, we find that the mindset, because I was in unique circumstances, I was able to see the unwinding of the Nazification of the German population over a number of years. And the Nazis are a prime example. But you even see it in more recent examples where the banksters, if we want to go into it in current time, we're right in the middle of one of those episodes. So here we are in a situation where we have a population that is increasingly poor and is dropping into poverty daily, en masse and individually. The tensions are rising that way globally, and at the same time, we have the hardening of the attitude of the powers that be and their distance from everybody that is in the real world, if you will, right? And so here they are giving themselves billions of dollars of bonuses to hedge fund managers and so on. At the same time, the countries that the hedge fund managers have raped, such as Greece, are going through this classic level of huge upheaval. And so we're seeing that fractalized pattern of unbalance that defeats itself at both ends. In other words, the mere fact that they set this derivative monster loose, while it enriched them, will also end up truly killing many of them as the level of anger and revenge in the general population rises to where individual actions combine into mob actions over these next few months and years. And we will see the irony of it all, but also the exquisite balance of it all, as these people who acted in an evil and improprietous manner and brought this bad karma on themselves are undone by that same act later on.
Very true. We received, one indicative letter of more that say, how can you talk about on your programs about what these people are doing and that you're onto them and what attitude to take and everything? How can you want them to know that you know? And gosh, who does that better than you? But
no,
that's
something I learned from Aikido, that you don't hate your enemy.
That's right.
You despise the action and the behavior that's being exhibited in an evil fashion, but the human is merely misguided and unaware. And in order to make them aware, you must be absolutely honest with them in terms of how you're going to deal with them, if you see my point.
Sure.
They have to actually also pay attention to those rules. If you follow, like, Michael Starian and David Icke, you will note in both of their works, that they frequently refer to the fact that these nasty bastards have to tell you how they're going to come and screw you, so that the victim is in essence willing in order for this stuff to work with their macrobe leaders. Now bear in mind, whether we believe it or not, whether we accept it or not, the powers that be do accept that there is a vibrational frequency that is invisible to the vast majority of humans, that contains living beings that they call macrobes, or that we shall call macrobes in absence of a true name for them, with which they interact. And those beings have told the powers that be, as far back as, 500 AD, in the case of certain lineages that I know of, have told them that if you do these things and you tell your victims what's going to happen, we'll give you power